Section 7.2, Law of Cosines. Law of cosines is a formula, and I am going to derive it just like I derived the law of sines. But you do not need to know how to derive it, you just need to know the formula. Law of sines is good for a triangle where you know all the sides and you don't know any of the angles. Also, you could use law of cosines if you have two sides that you know and an included angle, the angle in between. Use law of cosines. Because on those you cannot use law of sines because you'll have two unknowns. If you can use law of sines, use it because it's an easier formula to use than law of cosines. So I'm going to derive the formula. I drew a triangle, and I drew that triangle in the Cartesian coordinate system. So that the blue arrows, or lines with arrows, y-axis and x-axis. So this point is 0, 0. This point here, if this distance is a 0. Okay? Using this triangle here, I know that the cosine is the adjacent side over the hypotenuse. So I could figure out what this length is here, that adjacent length, because cosine is equal to adjacent over hypotenuse. My hypotenuse is b. So the adjacent side would be b times the cosine of c. So this right here would be b cosine of c. This distance, this opposite side, is my y. If I use sine, I have opposite over hypotenuse. If I solve for the opposite, I have hypotenuse times sine of c. So b sine of c. So there's that point. Now I'm going to use those points and use the fact that I drew two right triangles and use the fact that a leg squared plus a leg squared equals a hypotenuse squared. So this leg here is my x distance. This leg here is my y distance. Okay? Okay? Or I can look here. There's a leg also of the triangle. Okay? I'm using the triangle on the right-hand side. You could actually use the one on the left and derive it, and it would still work. But I'm going to use the one on the right. So I have a leg squared plus a leg squared equals a hypotenuse squared. Well, this leg is equal to the whole thing, which is a, minus this part, minus that. So that's what I have there. So there's my leg squared. That's a leg. So here's my other leg squared is equal to my hypotenuse squared. Foil. After I foiled, I put my b squared terms together and factored out a b squared. So that's what I did here. Sine squared plus cosine squared is equal to 1. So I can just rewrite that as b squared plus a squared minus 2ab cosine of c is still equal to c squared. This is the formula. This is the law of cosines. You need to know that. It's not the only way to write that formula. I could put a b here and a b here, so I'd have b squared is equal to, and then have these as a squared and b squared, and have this as an a and a b, and that's still my b. I could have these two as a's, and have b's and c's in here. So there are three different ways to write it. But notice that these letters are the same. Angle equal to that side squared. Okay? I also have a table that shows you when to use law of sines and law of cosines. If you can use law of sines, use it. It's so much easier. Okay? So this is what I said at the beginning. So I have a triangle. Sides A, B, and C. Given. So I wrote those down. I want to solve the triangle. So I want to find angle A, angle B, and angle C. Find your largest angle first. you find your largest angle first. So your largest angle is across from your largest side. So my largest angle would be C, since 7 is my largest side. So then I would use the formula C squared, so that's 7 squared is equal to 3 squared plus 5 squared minus 2 times 3 times 5 times the cosine of C. So that's what I have there. 7 squared is 49, 3 squared is 9, 5 squared is 25, and 2 times 5 is 10, times 3 is 30. There, I have it right there. You could write that as 30 if you want. 9 plus 25 is 34, so I have 34 minus 30 cosine of C. Solve for cosine of C. Do not do this first, right here, because order of operations says you have to multiply before you do any addition and subtraction. So I would divide through by, or subtract 34, and then I divide through by a negative 30. So if I subtract and then divide, okay, this is actually a special triangle that you know. So let me draw it out. It's negative, so cosine is negative here and here, but it has to be second quadrant because I can't have an angle in a triangle more than 180 degrees, so I'm in this quadrant here with my adjacent side and my hypotenuse. So my reference angle here is 60 degrees. So angle C is 120. Or you can pick up your calculator and do inverse cosine of negative 1/2, and you'll still get 120. So I know C is 120. Okay? Now that you have the one obtuse angle, you know the others are acute, so it doesn't really matter which one you do. If it were not an obtuse angle, and A and B could be an obtuse angle, if you started with the wrong one, you'd have to be really careful and always start with a smaller angle for law of sines. So now, find angle B. So I could use law of sines. The sine of B over side B, which is 5, is equal to the sine of 120 over 7. Get this out of the way. So that's what I'm... So we're doing law of sines now, because it's easier to use. And like I said, the sine of B over 5 is equal to the sine of 120 over 7. Cross multiply and then solve it for B. So I would cross multiply and solve for B, or sine of B. So when you cross multiply, you have 7 sine of B is equal to 5 sine of 120. Divide through by 7. I want B, not sine of B, so take the inverse sine. Okay? So if I would get my calculator, and I would do the inverse sine of 5 sine of 120. Let me do it right now. So I would do the inverse sine. Inverse sine is blue right there, so I do second inverse sine. And I like to use fractions, so to use your fraction. 5 sine of 120 on the top and 7 on the bottom. 38.2. Okay? I am going to store that in B. There it is. It's in B. So I have it later for use. Okay? So now, let's find angle A. Angle A is 180 minus 120 minus my angle B. So let me pull up my calculator. 180 minus the 120 minus my angle B. 21.8. And that's what you should get. Okay? You're done. Solved all the missing parts of the triangle. Next one. Solve a triangle. This is a side angle side triangle. Round to the nearest tenth of a degree. So let's find first a third side, because we can't use law of sines because we'd have 2 unknowns. You could try it, but you'd see you'd have 2 unknowns no matter what. Okay? So let's find side C. So C squared is equal to A squared plus B squared minus 2AB cosine of C. C squared is equal to 3 squared plus 7 squared minus 2 times 3 times 7 cosine of 37. 9 times 49 is 58. 2 times 3 times 7 is 42. I would pick up your calculator now and probably do it. Put this in your calculator. So let's do that. Or equal square root is what we put in our calculator. So pick up your calculator. And in my calculator, I am going to do the square root of 58, and you could actually put it all in. You could just put the numbers in. You could do 3 squared plus 9 squared, do the whole thing if you'd like. I'm not going to because I already did the math, and I know the math is right there, but you could put it all in. It's a long formula. 42 cosine of 37. And you get to 4.9. You don't need to do that. I took the square root right away. Okay? It's C. So I'm going to take that because I'm going to use it later. I'm going to store in C. So now it's in C if I want to use it for later on. Okay? Now I'm going to use law of sines. I'm going to find my smallest angle. The reason I'm going to find my smallest angle is because law of sines, or sine, is positive in the first and second quadrant. So I don't know if one of these is an obtuse angle or not. It might not be and it won't matter. But when I do inverse of sine, I always get a first quadrant angle. It always gives me the acute angle. So work with the smallest angle first. So my smallest angle, smallest side is 3, smallest angle is A. So I would do, that's what I said, they can't distinguish between the two, so do the smallest angle. Okay, so now, let me move it down. The sine of A over side A is equal to sine of C over side C. Sine of A is what I want to find, so A is my unknown. So sine of A over 3 is equal to sine of 37 over, and remember this right here, that's in C, so don't forget it's in C. Solve, cross multiply, and then divide. So you get 4.9 sine of A is equal to 3 sine of 37, then divide by the 4.9. And again, remember this is C, and then do the inverse. Okay, so let me get my calculator and show you how this works with my calculator. Inverse sine. So second, sine. I like my fraction, so I'm going to use the fraction button. So there's inverse sine. 3 sine of 37 goes on the top. On the bottom, that is in C. So I'm just going to do C, so I have an exact number. And you get 21.4. Okay? 21.4. 21.4. Okay? So now I have that side was 4.9, 21.4, and then you could just do 180 minus 21.4 minus 37, and you get 121.6. And you're done. Okay? That's it for the notes.